Hi, I'm Dr. Ramani, and you can watch my series by hitting those links below. One of the things we notice in a person who has abandonment issues is rumination about abandonment. So at the times they aren't with a person, they may spend a lot of time thinking about, when am I going to see them again? What are they doing? And even when they're with the person, they may spend a lot of time ruminating about the point of departure. Now, when we're talking about abandonment, we're not even necessarily talking about someone going away for weeks or months or permanently. We may be talking about someone simply going to work in the morning. And a person who struggles with abandonment may actually really find themselves, even as that moment is coming, somebody has to go do something. They may have to go to work or go to some other commitment. That point of separation can really, really be anxiety provoking for somebody who struggles with issues around abandonment. One thing to keep in mind when we talk about abandonment issues is to actually understand that point of departure. I think the term abandonment is such a tricky one because a person who has so-called abandonment issues struggles with what I'm calling the point of departure or the point of separation. Abandonment is an experience a person has when they feel like they've been left, and not only left, but left to fend for themselves, that they have been really left in a vulnerable position. That word abandonment really implies one person leaving someone and almost not taking responsibility. So it's almost a word that fits when we're talking about, for example, abandoning a child or abandoning someone who may be in a place of need because they're not able to take care of themselves or something like that. So there's a depth to that word. So a person who has abandonment issues really struggles with that point of separation or departure. The perfect person who is having the abandonment issue is actually perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. They can feed themselves, they can drive a car, they can go to work. But there's something about that point of departure that really feels so primal, almost like, again, a child being left. Many people struggle with the point of separation. Separation anxiety is not something that's just about childhood. It can happen in adulthood as well. But that separation anxiety, when it escalates to a more sort of impaired or pathologic level where it's getting in the way of a person's social functioning or creating distress for someone, that's when we elevate it to the level of abandonment issues. But something else that's interesting about people who struggle with abandonment issues is we can also see some of these patterns at the point of reunion. That point of reunion, when people come back together, it's called rapprochement. It's something we often use to describe children. When two people, when the child comes back to the mother, maybe after the parent has, when the child comes back with a parent or caregiver. And that could be because the parent or caregiver had to go do something, gone to work, something, and the child was in someone else's care. At the point of rapprochement, a child who's securely attached will actually be very happy to see their caregiver and kind of settle into the relationship, and they'll kind of pick up where they left off. But in a child who has, for example, a more insecure, perhaps anxious kind of an attachment or an avoidant attachment, that point of coming together, the child is either indifferent if they have an avoidant attachment or quite agitated if they have an anxious attachment. We see this rapprochement play out in adulthood too. When we look to see when two adults come together after a period of separation or departure, and they join up again, in securely attached adult relationships, we look for joy at seeing the person, usually a hug, how have you been? And they sort of pick up. They're interested in each other. They're soothed by each other. And they tend to sort of get into conversation and affiliation. But in people with more anxious attachment styles, that point of rapprochement in adults can actually be quite complicated. And we see that in people with abandonment issues. But at rapprochement, the coming back together, people with abandonment issues will actually, believe it or not, even though they have abandonment issues, become quite agitated, angry, upset, and there'll be a lot of emotion at that moment. Almost like you feel like, gosh, we haven't seen each other for a while, and you feel like you're looking for a fight. And that's what people will describe in people who have abandonment issues. Exactly at the moment you would think somebody who struggles with abandonment would be overjoyed. It's almost as though the emotion at that point, the sense of betrayal, the sense of being abandoned, that person ever left, means that the reunions can be quite fraught as well. There's likely to be a sort of a clinginess and sort of stickiness in close relationships. There may be a desire to want to spend all their time with somebody and really, really rely on somebody, grow to count on them. another issue we might see is a sort of a riff on that in a person with abandonment issues, is that they may attempt to make themselves indispensable to someone. So in that way, they may offer to do all kinds of things, stretch themselves really thin, drive them places, get them things, keep up the house, do favors for them. But again, sort of making themselves sort of necessary and indispensable, so then somebody would not abandon them. Something that I do see for people who have abandonment issues, that there's a lot of anxiety associated with it. And in many ways, it's the most unfortunate thing about it that I've seen is that the person who struggles with abandonment is already living into the goodbye, even when the person's in the same room with them. So it's a constant anticipation, a constant anxiety about the point where when two people are going to sort of go their separate ways. And what that does then is the person who is struggling with abandonment issues will often, it's almost like there's a creation of an argument. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other person's confused because they think we're in the same room. Why is this person talking about when I'm going to leave? There's also a lot of sort of what I call verbalized rumination, where a person will often say things like, one day you're going to leave me, the day you leave me, someday, I don't know, like the day you decide not to come home. And there's a lot of articulating of that fear but out loud, not just in a person's head. And that can actually, I've seen it over and over again, create a lot of tension in a relationship, because not only is the person who's afraid of being abandoned living with this anxiety, so much so that they're talking about it out loud, that the other person in the relationship sort of feels like they're either constantly defending themselves or reassuring the other person, and can often feel quite exhausted over time because they really don't have an intention of leaving. Sadly, over time, that can wear them down. And sometimes you'll see a person says, you keep saying, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave. How would you feel if one day I actually did that? Because a person who is constantly being accused of saying if hearing that you're going to leave, they'll often feel like they're being painted as sort of a bad person in the relationship, and they have no intention of it. And so that can feel very uncomfortable as well. So it creates a very uncomfortable dance in a relationship that I've seen that causes so much anxiety for the person who has the abandonment issues, but also causes a lot of discomfort for the person who has no intention of abandoning someone, but over time really gets worn down by the dynamic. Hi, I'm Dr. Ramani, and you can watch my series by hitting those links below.
Thanks for watching. Check out the links below for more information on how to access this full series, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new mental health videos every week. Did you like what you heard in this video? If you want to ask a MedCircle doctor a question directly, you can learn how by visiting the links in the description below.